So these are the 10th, 11th, and 12th things that I read this year. Right to the point. The 10th thing that I read this year was this $5 really ghetto copy of The Sorrows of Young Werther by Johann Goethe, I think is how you pronounce that. Obviously, I don't speak German. The reason I wanted to bother reading this was, first of all, I figured it'd be something a little lighter to read. It wasn't. But the main reason, the second reason, is this is something that I saw referenced again and again and again in other stuff that I was reading. Not only this specific book, but other stuff by this author. I've got a copy of Faust on my shelf that I probably ought to actually get around to reading at some point. But that's another book that I see referenced over and over. So I figured, let me go back to the source material if I want to actually understand what they're trying to say there. To be even more specific, the point where I saw this referenced was in one of the other books that I mentioned in another of these videos. Stendhal referenced this over and over and over again when he was trying to talk about this kind of spectrum, these two different ways, these two different extremes of going about love. And he references this Don Juan story that apparently isn't insanely popular today. Basically this little, Playboy type of going about love. And he references this as the opposite end of that spectrum. And you kind of, obviously, after you read it, get why he's referencing that, because the whole theme of this is this guy, without getting into the plot, I guess, too much of it, is kind of exploring what happens at the extremes of romantic intoxication, when you're absolutely infatuated with somebody to the point where it almost becomes obsessive, in this case, it literally does become obsessive. And his big takeaway is apparently nothing good. This is apparently the whole, if you've seen the whole, sensitive young man memes or whatever going around social media, this is apparently literally the source for that. This is where that comes from. And apparently not only that today being relevant, but apparently that exact same sort of phenomena happened when this book came out initially. As I went down a whole rabbit hole with this, evidently it was banned in a lot of places, or tried to ban, or there was some kind of social taboo against it, because at least allegedly at the time, it inspired a wave of, I have to spoil part of the plot, I guess, in this case, but at the end of the book, this guy ends up killing himself, and apparently it inspired a lot of copycat suicides, allegedly, and so you had this kind of social pressure to keep this book out of people's hands, especially your sensitive young men of the world, I guess. And I think kind of core to that, and maybe the reason for all that, is it gets into this Don Quixote sort of question about, is it better to live in kind of cold, hard reality with all the benefits and issues that come with that, or is it better to live in this fantasy land with all the issues and benefits that come with that? And I think maybe the thing from this book that exemplifies that the best is you get this guy, the main character of Werther, and he can't sleep one night. He's thinking about her, and so he gets up in the middle of the night. It's 4 a.m, and he goes out walking around the outskirts of town, and he comes upon this guy that's out there picking flowers in the middle of the night, and he stops and talks with him, and this guy says that he's out picking flowers for his princess and yada yada yada, and then the guy's mom calls for him, and she catches up to him, and I've been looking for you all night and all that, and basically explains to our main character, to Werther, that this guy just got out of the insane asylum, and that evidently, obviously, if it wasn't obvious already from the fact that he's out at 4 a.m. picking flowers for his princess, that the princess didn't exist, that he just made it up. It was a figment of his imagination. And then after all that, Werther ends up kind of looking back on that, and it dawns on him that, yeah, sure, this guy is legitimately insane, but he's also he's content, he's happy, he's out picking flowers for his princess. I could yap on about that, but for the sake of time, let me get to the second thing for this video, 11th thing that I read this year. Sailing to Sarantium. This is the only part of a series that I ended up reading this year. This is by Gavriel. This is another one. I wanted to read something a little lighter and something just kind of out of the general theme of what I've been reading. This one specifically is, I guess I would almost say historical fiction, but that's not entirely true. It probably should be historical fiction, but he sets it in a fantasy world for some arbitrary reason. It's basically like a history dweeb sort of book. It's basically set in the Byzantine Empire. He changes names around to the point where like it almost put me off through the first 100 pages or so, because as you're reading through, you realize, oh, like this place is clearly supposed to be this place. This group of people is clearly supposed to be this group of people, so on, to the point where I don't know why he didn't just make it a historical fiction. But I don't have a ton to say about it. It's entertaining. It's not a dissect every last theme throughout it sort of book. It was the closest thing that I've read this year to genre fiction, which I am not a really big fan of. I think genre fiction, as I'll get to in a later video, I guess, genre fiction takes the actual like interesting stuff about a lot of books and just dulls it down and dilutes it to its dumbest form. But it was interesting. It was the sort of book that's made for history dweebs. That's about all I have to say about that. The 12th thing I read this year then was actually technically not all of that, just the first half. This is a 2-part book for some reason. The first half is a bit of philosophy. I guess both halves are philosophy, but I only read the first half. That's Fear and Trembling by Soren Kierkegaard. The whole big thing with this is he's trying to answer the question of what does it actually mean to really have faith. His whole conclusion is that faith is actually this paradoxical thing that maybe is not even attainable, but that at least we can fathom the fact that it might be attainable, and so that's enough for him. I'm going to try my best to stay coherent in this. This is something that I guess with any philosophy, you got to read it over and over and over again to really get a clearer idea of what exactly the author's trying to say. I think, and hopefully have enough of a clue to go through this, but the kind of launching pad for all of this, the impetus for this question that he's got, is the story of Abraham. I guess, honestly, the whole essay, I guess if you would call it, the whole essay is just an analysis of the story of Abraham from different angles. And the thing that strikes me about Abraham is how paradoxical his faith is that he's prayed for the son, he's waited his entire life up until the end of his life for the son that's been promised to him, and he's hoped against hope for it, and that it's been provided for him. Like his faith has been answered, and then he's asked to go and, well, he's asked to do that. That's kind of something that Kierkegaard points out, is he doesn't tell anybody that he feels this need, that he feels like he's been called by God to go and kill the son, to sacrifice the son. He doesn't tell anybody that. It's something that is literally just between him and God. He even goes into another analysis where he's talking about, and this is where I'm going to start to lose the thread a little bit, how there's some things that are considered good, like good moral things for us to do because society deems it to be so. There's certain things that are deemed good because there's some objective reality that's imposed on us. And there's other things that you feel are good because you feel they are good. And some of those things are acceptable even if they would traditionally go against what we deem good, because they are for some greater purpose. And he references some of the Greek tragedies at this point. He says something about some figure that sacrifices his daughter because it would guarantee that they win this war down the road. This horrible, heinous thing that we normally, under normal circumstances, wouldn't permit, but it's permissible and maybe even a good in a tragic sort of way thing because it's for this greater good. That's not what happens with the story of Abraham and Isaac. He's pointing out this is something like, who benefits from this? Nobody benefits from this. It's just something that he feels he needs to do. He kind of transcends this whole concept of the greater good. And that is, I think the right word is he transcends that. It's not that he's violating it. It's not that he's falling short of it. It's that Abraham is the pillar of faith, paradoxically, that he is, because he is willing to do this thing just because he feels he needs to. He feels he's being called to do it, and it benefits no one in this case. He doesn't want to do it. Obviously, Isaac doesn't want him to do it. He doesn't even tell Sarah about it. This is just something between him and God. And I guess on that note, through that, he gives two kind of archetypal sort of figures. He talks about this knight of infinite resignation, which is the person that has had faith to this point, and they basically concede that it's not going to happen. This is like, I think he uses the example of ironically, I didn't plan that out, but like in the Sorrows of Young Werther, somebody that has this peasant that is adamant that he's going to marry this princess, and the Knight of Infinite Resignation would concede that that's not realistic, it's not going to happen. And he himself even admits that, well, there is this second figure he talks about, but he himself even admits that he doesn't know if it's possible for human beings to actually attain this. He himself, he says, isn't able to attain this. But the fact that we have this idea of Abraham means that we're capable of conceiving it, and so maybe it is possible. This gets into like Nietzschean Ubermensch sort of territory, I guess. But he puts forward this idea of the knight of faith, this person that does what Abraham was capable of doing, that transcends this universal good or even the personal good out of some paradoxical hope against hope sort of faith. Hopefully that was coherent in some kind of way. That took me a lot of rereading. That was a bit of a slog to get through. But I think it was one of the more productive things that I read this year. I'm going to cut that one there. Hopefully that's not over the time limit already. I'll have to cut that down, pare that down, and see.